Robert McConnell. I am running for Solano County Supervisor District 1. I have a background in government consisting of a bachelor's degree in public administration, a year of graduate study, then where I was writing a master's thesis on the right of the public employee to strike back in the days when that was a hot issue. I then went to the Army and served as a rifle combat infantryman in Vietnam. I returned to graduate school and law school, completed law school, worked on the law review, was a law clerk for the chief judge of the U.S. Court of Appeals in San Francisco, served a short time as a deputy district attorney, and finally when I saw my city doing things I just couldn't really stomach because they were in bankruptcy, I decided I had to get involved, and I proceeded to tell people what I thought, and son of a gun, the voters agreed with me. So now I'm doing the same thing because I'm running for county supervisor since I cannot run for city council again. So I'm asking you to pay close attention. I value your support, and I'm looking to hear from you because it's a two-way street. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. Solano County Supervisor Monica Brown.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you for coming out and not having any of the raindrops drop on you as you made it in. I'm a mom of two great kids. I taught school for 39 years. I was a trustee at Solano Community College where we passed the PLA, and it was kind of rauncous that night, but we got it through. And in 2016, when Linda chose not to run, I ran. So I ran and won. And I believe that things that I have worked on, such as Laura's Law, such as the flooding and the fires that have happened in my district, and working with all of my constituents has enabled me to know what's going on in my district. And I'm seeing a card. The yellow means what? Okay, because there was no number on it, and I thought I had the right. That's okay. Okay, 15 seconds. So I love my district. My district goes from Mayor Island, where we're sitting, to Benicia, all the way through parts of Fairfield, the Suisun Marsh, as well as Grizzly Island. So when the fires were happening, it was Grizzly Island all the way through to Mayor Island. So just my district. So, thank you.
Thank you very much. Ms. Rochelle Sherlock.
My journey started, I was a daughter of a teenage mother. I am the product of intergenerational cycles of poverty, dysfunction, and abuse. I was the primary breadwinner for my family at the age of 21. When I was a child, we were homeless for 3 months. And when I got into my early 20s, I made a vow that at the end of my life, I want my life to stand for something. I wanted to make sure that people who had my experience were given opportunities that I wasn't given. I wanted to address institutional barriers that existed for people, and I have pursued that from the very beginning, from starting the Girls Circle, establishing the perinatal multidisciplinary team to deal with children and unborn babies who are at risk, all the way through establishing and co-founding the Senior Coalition of Solano County, founding the Fall Prevention Partnership, working on fire preparedness. And my whole life is about the mission of serving our community, and that's why I'm here.
Thank you. And lastly tonight, Kay Patrice Williams.
Hi, my name is Kay Patrice Williams, and I'm running for County Supervisor District 2, which is different from District 1. I am really excited to be here because we're in Vallejo, and I see a lot of Vallejoans here. Although I've been in Fairfield for the last 3 years, I have a 20-year connection with Vallejo. I am the woman I am today because of Vallejo. I was able to buy a house here. I was able to start a business here. I was able to start a family here. I was able to go to law school while I was here. I am who I am today because of you, and I can't wait to proceed through this candidates forum and to answer questions and really get to answer questions and let you know who I am.
Thank you. You may have noticed a yellow card and a red card. We're going to talk about those in a moment. In the meantime, I do want to introduce Michelle Adolph as our timekeeper this evening. I'd also like to provide recognition to the members of the committee for 411 series. Would you mind standing?
Or if you do mind, that's okay.
If you're going to stay seated, it's America. You know how it works. As we start the discovery and discussion, question and discovery part of the program, these are the rules. Each candidate will have 2 minutes to answer each question. The timekeeper will signal with a yellow flag when 1 minute remains and a red flag when there are 15 seconds remaining. Please conclude your answer on seeing the red flag. Audience questions. After the predetermined questions that we've pre-designed have been answered, we will have a lot of time for individuals to pose questions to the candidates. I believe that tickets have been distributed with a number, and if you don't have one, please see Mrs. Scari here at the front so that she can give you a ticket, and you will be able to pose your personal question, or not your personal, your county-related question to the candidates. In fairness, all individuals that desire to ask a question must submit their number. The question shall be asked in a maximum of 30 seconds and must be succinct, and the candidate will again have 2 minutes to respond. The questions. It's widely recognized that Vallejo has been a city challenged in many ways since the base closure at Mare Island 23 years ago. This caused a major shift in resources throughout the city, and we have never recovered. While the base closure was centered in Vallejo, the impact was regional, yet Vallejo seems to have been left alone and neglected in the growth and improvement that other nearby cities have experienced. Your personal views of priorities. If elected, what will be your top 3 objectives? Let's start on the far end with Ms. K. Patrice.
Thank you. Listening to the question, when I think about it, the closure of Mare Island, that affects tax revenues, tax base. So that went down greatly with the closure of the base. I can't say that that's connected to the county. I see that as a Vallejo City Council, more of a Vallejo City Council question. So I do want to say that. But with that said, I am an economic development person. I'm your economic development candidate. I believe in, I would like to see industries identified. I want us to have a very clear identity in who we are in Solano County. What industries are we known for? Let's grow those industries, and then let's create pathways to employment. Let's create really innovative views to grow Solano County and increase jobs and small business development. Small business development, we can do some really amazing creative things in Vallejo. We're sitting here, by the way, we're not in Mare Island, we're in South Vallejo. And South Vallejo, I believe we would qualify for a HUD zone here. And what that means is we would get, small businesses here would be able to get procurement opportunities, government procurement opportunities that would grow to, you can create legacy, generational growth here if we do this thing right and if we're innovative. So that describes my priorities. It is innovation, it is economic development growth, and it is housing plans and priorities.
Thank you. So that we can be clear with the question, the impact of the closure was regional, yet Vallejo seems to have been left behind and neglected. The basis of the question is, what are your personal priorities relative to just the overall well-being of this community?
Thank you, Calvin. First of all, I would say that a big piece of this is we actually have to engage the community and identify where those gaps and challenges are. My entire professional career has been identifying gaps and challenges and then working together and building partnerships to address them. You are right, Vallejo has been left behind, and I think it's been criminal. One of the things that I did when I was the consultant to the Senior Coalition of Solano County is I ensured that we went ahead and did multiple educational events here in Vallejo. We have to actually engage the citizens in identifying what those challenges and what their interests are, what their priorities are, and then we need a voice, an advocate, somebody who's going to be courageous and say, enough, we need to spread out the resources. As far as just general issues, I think I'm passionate about this. I came from a place of not having any kind of resources and being left behind because of my childhood experiences. And I tell you, this is my personal mission in life, is to really help justify or set some of that straight. As far as just some issues that I want to address, is throughout the county, we need to address homelessness. It's a critical thing. We need to address the root cause of homelessness, and we need to also address the root cause of crime. I know that Vallejo, along with Fairfield and other parts of the county, really struggle with those two issues, and I think those are the places where I would like to start focusing.
Thank you. Supervisor Brown?
Yes. So just FYI, even the city of Sassoon is not doing well. I worry they do not have any economic growth. So what does that have to do with Vallejo? Well, why was Safeway allowed not to have a grocery store? Who allowed that to happen? What do we have, another 10, 15 years or something before we get a supermarket here? One of the things is that the county has done an economic plan. And what we're trying to do is we're working together, and we have gone out around the United States to have jobs try to come here. But personally, for me, this coming Tuesday on December 10th, we're bringing forward home kitchens. Home kitchens is a way for small businesses to grow in your own home. You are allowed to produce 60 meals a week. Has to be, you can only earn less than $50,000, but it's a way to start, and the Small Business Alliance has said that they will work with folks that want to have a home kitchen. They will work with you to make sure that you're certified. They will work with you on your PR plan. How are you going to promote yourself? So there are things that we can do, because most small businesses are where you generate the income that keeps an economy going. But we do need to look globally, but we also need to ask ourselves, what are things that we can do? And one of them is to just keep volunteering. There's a lot of volunteering that we do in Vallejo, and we just have to keep working on it. But there is no magic pill. But I also believe that Mare Island has never been taken care of, and we should put pressure on Congressman Mike Thompson and say, you need to get this cleaned up. It's been 20 years.
Thank you. And to reiterate, what is your top 3 objectives?
1, housing; 2, transportation; 3, economic development, with 3A being educational emphasis to support that economic development. And the reason for that, when Vallejo came out of bankruptcy, basically it had to rebuild itself. It was almost devastated. We've gone up to 2,000 jobs now on Mare Island. We have brought in industry. We are bringing in more business, so it's not like nothing has happened. Why I believe Vallejo has been left behind, and I'm sorry, Monica, but this goes to how I feel about the Board of Supervisors, is that most of the money, especially in transportation, is going to the central part of this county. If you look at Vacaville, you look at Fairfield, that's where the money is going. And today, the state and the regional development has emphasized that housing must go where transportation is going to be located. That's the bus stations, that's the BART stations down in the central part, that's our ferry terminal, that's all along Fairgrounds Drive. And you need somebody who can advocate and go after that transportation dollar, because it's linked to housing. That means we have to build, because you're not going to solve the housing problem without more units. I'm in property management. We have a property management company. We don't have enough housing in this state. In fact, we're 49th out of 50 in the entire state of in the entire country. That's housing units. That's not just affordable housing. That's the whole housing units. We have to have transportation because it brings in the money, and the people who are going to be able to afford to live here are going to have to transport themselves out of this city, as I did for many years when I commuted to San Francisco. And then just touching on economic development, yes, we need small business development, absolutely, but we also need the big hitters as well. Because with the big hitters comes the jobs, but they lead with their personnel office and they look at our educational system, which has to be improved. There is just no getting around it. It's almost as bad as our housing. And I believe and have fought for improvement in housing. It's got to improve. Our economic development will follow our educational system. And if we don't bring back the public schools and keep them, we're going to destroy democracy.
Thank you. One of the top issues here in our city is related to policing. Vallejo has the highest rate of violent crime in the county. Our policing resources are stretched beyond capacity. It is reasonable to think that recognizing this and having the data support it, the county, by way of our local supervisor, will be more significantly engaged in assisting in addressing the various issues related to policing. As a supervisor representing Vallejo, what can you commit to do to bring resources to address this issue? What can the county do to help stop the epidemic of police violence that disproportionately affects our city? And we'll start with you, Shirley.
First of all, we really have to work on economic development, and the reason why we have to work on economic development is the city needs resources so that they can fully staff the police department. We need the city to be able to compete and attract the brightest, the best, the most effective law enforcement officers, and I think that's one step, and making sure they're applying best practices, community policing, getting out there and having coffee with the residents, understanding the residents, doing those kinds of things. On a county level, the county needs to be responsible for the people that exit the jails and where they go. Are they given opportunities for rehabilitation? I brought in $6 million for Prop 47, which actually addresses a transition gap from jail to community by allowing people who, by the way, are primarily homeless to be in a sober living bed. They're giving wraparound case management services. They're receiving legal services to address their record remedies, which are things that would prohibit them from getting jobs. We're connecting them to workforce training and job training and making sure that they have an opportunity to be successful, reunify with their family, etc. I think that a big piece of this is we need to think about the entire system of the criminal justice, and there's a lot more I can say on that because there's so many details that come into it. But I would also say economic living wage jobs, so people, part of crime is really around economy, not having the financial resources, not having opportunities, not having access to, the kinds of amenities that we need, like living in food deserts or living in job deserts. So we need living wage jobs, we need great workforce development so people can actually receive the type of training they need to be qualified for those jobs, and then we need to make sure that we're working really well together in terms of partnerships with city, county, workforce development, and placing the people with the jobs here locally.
Thank you. I'm not sure if anybody's keeping a word count, but they're getting a lot of words in that 2 minutes. I'm sorry, Supervisor.
No, that's all right, that's fine. So I've talked with Tom Farrar, the sheriff, and one of the things he's told me is that you don't hear anything negative about the sheriffs. You don't hear the stuff that's going on. And so I would like to have the sheriff sit down and work with the police department, but you have to understand, guys, there's a contract. And the county has nothing to do with taking care of the city of Vallejo. Now, we have a deputy sheriff, Brandy, who does a wonderful, phenomenal job dealing with the unincorporated area of Benicia and Vallejo. That's what she does. And she and I meet once a month. We email back and forth if there's any issues. Citizens will call me. She will go out and investigate. In fact, one right now that I have going on is that I have asked, because we have a situation and so we're looking at something. But where I'm going with it is that you don't hear anything bad. So Tom is willing to work with, if people are willing to work back. It takes both. And I think we also need to look at, and again, I have no control over who HR hires, but we need to be looking at who actually does get hired. And I know that people wanted to have some changes in the contract, but it is what it is. So the other is that we need to also work in our schools and talk with our students. One of the things that I always did is that I always told my students, because in 2 years, because I taught 8th grade, in 2 years they were going to be driving, you keep your hands on the steering wheel. You say, yes ma'am, no ma'am. You are as polite as possible. I can pull you out, but I can't bring you back.
Thank you. Councilmember McComb.
Thank you. I'll try to slow down a little bit this time. Criminal problems in Vallejo are indeed more rampant here than in most jurisdictions. We are an urban city. We are not a suburban city like Fairfield or Vacaville or Suisun City. We are urban. We are inner urban. And with inner urban cities come inner urban problems. So that suggests, how do we address that through a police agency? And that leads us into best practices. Sonoma County was faced with a similar problem a few years back. And their position was they formed a best practices commission consisting of advisors from all of the cities in Sonoma County. They assembled at the county level, and all the representatives of the police departments and of the communities were represented there, and they discussed how to handle the different problems. Well, the peer pressure that came out of that was enough to convince some of the people in the police departments of that county to no longer go cowboy. And I understand cowboy. I've been an infantry combat person. I've been involved in the weapons and the use of weapons. So I know the mentality that goes into it. But when you have peer pressure in a law enforcement agency, then you're going to bring that down a little bit. So I would advocate for best practices commission at the county level, consisting of representatives from all of the cities in the county of Solano County. And that also ties us into the housing and the educational aspect of my priorities. Because if you have people incarcerated, 90% of them are coming back. They're not going to stay there forever. They are returning to our community. And if we don't prepare them for that return, that's our mistake. So that means we have to have training. And maybe somebody didn't get the education while they were growing up because of peer pressure, but now that they're incarcerated, they have an opportunity where they have to go to treatment. They have to go to counseling. They have to go to educationals. You have a confined, controlled environment you can take advantage of. Now, China, I hate to use the word, brainwashes those people. That's maybe we need to approach it more along those lines as well.
Patrice Williams.
So, as a black woman with a black husband and a black son, I understand what it's like to be afraid and needing to teach your son how to behave in all instances. I get that. I also want to acknowledge that we have really great police officers. We have a lot of them. I talk to them all the time. And we have a few that aren't so good. That's the hard conversation. Those few that aren't so good, what do you do? How do you get them out of the system? And I liken it to this. We all have had this job, have a job, and in that job, we're like, Mike and Bob are awful. Why do they work here? Yeah. So that's the question. It's like these few bad out of this great good. So that's the way we need to look at the situation. That said, I'm asked the question all the time, but the truth is, Solano County, we have our only enforcement is the sheriff's department. It's not the city of Vallejo. And also, hopefully a question will come up later about the district attorney. That's another part of Solano County that we need to look at. The district attorney, how do they touch this issue? So that's another part of this. But I just want to acknowledge that I want to acknowledge that years ago, when I worked at Sereno Village, I was a manager at Sereno Village. We had community policing in Vallejo. And it was the most amazing thing ever. The community worked hand in hand with the police, and we were able to get calls for services down. I would like to see that as a model, even though we don't cover that in the county level.
Thank you. We're going to move on to homelessness and housing. And I know that some of it was addressed in the initial introduction, but we've got to cover it. Homelessness is a challenging issue in our city. It has been identified as an issue that is caused by several factors, including economics as they relate to the cost of housing, mental health, and drug usage in addition. Oftentimes, these issues are addressed through police action rather than more appropriately social services. There are rumors that Vallejo is a drop-off zone for some homeless individuals from other cities in the county. What types of ideas for solutions to address this challenge do you have? And what resources do you believe that Vallejo should be accessing to address the housing challenge? Please speak specifically to the mentally ill, the addicted, and seniors on fixed income. And let's start with Ms. Monica Brown.
It's on. It was red, sorry. Well, a couple things. Number one, I was able to get Laura's Law through. And Laura's Law allows, in fact, even the city of Fairfield is using it as one of their tools, so that when you reach out to a homeless person, you can ask and see whether or not they're going to need some treatment. So we're able to do that. We didn't have that in Solano County before. So at least we have Laura's Law through. Also, Assemblyman Jim Frazier put a $14 million bill, made it all the way through, and is stuck in appropriations. And that $14 million was to build a 35-bed mental health facility in Fairfield, where it was not near anybody's home, but right next to wraparound services on Beck Avenue. It is stuck there. So we need to just keep working, and I see his representative here with you. I love your hair, by the way. But what we have to do is we have to keep working with Tim Grayson, and to get that money, that $14 million. The other is that with Cap Solano, we have been using heat money, and the Mission Solano, which is now called Shelter Inc. People can go, but unfortunately it's a little bit different this time. You have to have a funding source. So what we have to do is we have to work with folks to make sure that are they getting their Social Security? Are they a veteran? Should they be getting their money? So that there's a funding source, that there's a place for them. The other is that, and you guys should be really proud of yourself, you know, Vallejo got the Navigation Center. This didn't come easy. Let's be honest with everybody. It's because the hospitals can't go dumping guys. That's why they gave the money, and I'm looking forward to when this happens. But there's the red card.
Would you like me to repeat the question?
No, I'm fine, thank you. Homelessness is going to require a commitment of a lot of money. If you don't believe me, look at what San Francisco has spent over the last probably 4 decades. I used to walk through the Tenderloin every day on my way to court. And the same problems are there today that were there 30 and 40 years ago. So we're going to have to make a commitment to spend some money. But 80% of the people who are homeless are not impacted by the desire to remain on the streets. About 20% of them are. The rest of them want help. And many of the homelessness come from this county. In fact, the studies that we have been provided indicate that 65% of the people who are homeless in Solano County became homeless in this county. They didn't get shipped in. They came from this county to start with. There are people. That means when we have an eviction, my suggestion is we have a homeless advocate either accompany the sheriffs on their rounds or to be available for an on-call basis, so that you don't have somebody sitting on the side of the curb wondering where to go. And I've seen that when they evict on Tuesdays in this city. We also have the same resources for people who need mental health. But that means we're going to have to build. We're going to have to build housing that addresses every need. Veterans, mentally impaired, elderly, you name it. We have to build more, or we will continue to have a homeless problem. So if we can reach the 80% of the people who want to get off the streets, that's going to substantially improve our environment to start with. And for the other 20%, we're going to have to be a little more hardcore. But homelessness will be a problem as long as society is not willing to commit money to it. That means it's got to come from the state and the federal government, because the local jurisdictions at the county and the city level do not, and probably never will have, enough. So if you're prepared to do something about homeless, let's talk to our state legislators, let's talk to our federal people and say, we need some more funding in this area, because otherwise it's not going to happen.
Thank you.
Thank you. I have a background in homelessness and affordable housing. And what I will tell you is that we get enough. We get enough. We do not even have our arms around this situation. I was looking at the point in time count. That's a count that we do every year, and we count all the homeless on the street. And the number right now in Solano County is right over 1,000, and it's wrong. The nonprofits that work with the homeless and Solano County employees that work with the homeless, guess what they say? The number is wrong. Times it by 3. How can we even get our arms around it if we don't even have our numbers right? So let's start there. That's the starting point. The second is we need an aggressive, Robert is right, we do not have enough housing units. I know the number in the state of California is we are 3.5 million units underneath where we need to be. I don't know what the number in Solano County is, but there's a number. What is it? We need to start there. We need more housing, and it needs to be robust, it needs to be aggressive, and it needs to hit different income points. How many of us, when we say market, I heard someone say market rate, we need to be at an 80-20 split. 80%, that's $3,000. How many of us can afford a $3,000 rent? Oh, I don't see any hands. That's not where we really need to be thoughtful in this. And we really need to hit workforce housing. That's the word. Thank you.
Thank you. Vallejo is the largest of 7 cities in the county. I am so sorry.
I would have just said and just move it on.
Caught me. Miss Sherlock, no, she gets her chance.
I want my chance. So we need to expand the conversation on homelessness. So much of the conversation is about housing affordability, and yes, that's an issue. We also need to identify the fact that when we look at the homeless population, it's not a uniform population. Right? People didn't all land in homelessness under the same circumstances. So you have individuals and families who became homeless because they fell hard in their luck. We're seeing a lot of that with the seniors. Actually, I facilitated a senior homelessness event with the PEAS program a number of years ago to really raise awareness around the number of seniors that were becoming rapidly homeless. And that was merely a result of the fact that their rent increases were outweighing their income. So we have that population to deal with. For the most part, I would say that population really wants to take advantage of any services that are available, right? Help them get into jobs, help them get into housing, help them get stabilized, give them the resources that they need. Let's help them help themselves because they want to help themselves. But we also have a lot of people who have mental health issues and a whole lot of them that have substance abuse issues. And we're not talking about addiction. So we can develop the most shelters and all the affordable housing in the world, but if people aren't being treated for their addiction, they're not going to be able to they won't be paying the rent because they'll be doing their drugs, they're going to be disruptive, we're going to have eviction issues, and these are the issues we have to get our arms around and address. I'm going to tell you right now, the county has not done a sufficient job when its mental health workforce in responding to the need of mental health, the mental health needs of citizens. They may call, it may take a while before they actually get a chance to get a screening, then it may take, who knows, maybe a week or a couple of weeks to see a counselor, it may be 48 hours or longer to see a psychiatrist and get their medications. We have to look at this holistically. We also have to recognize that we need different strategies for different subsets of the population of homeless, because they're not all the same, they have different and unique needs.
Thank you very much. Vallejo is the largest of 7 cities in the county. I have been informed, and I'm not sure if it's an accurate number, but it appears that there is $1.1 billion available in this county budget. Is that an accurate number? Are any of you aware?
When you would say available, what does that mean?
That was the statement that was made.
Okay.
Is the county budget $1.1 billion?
It's over $1 billion.
It's over $1 billion.
If it's 1.1, yes.
Of the 7 cities in the county, to your knowledge, which city receives the largest amount of resources? Vallejo being the largest, why would it not be allocated the largest amount of resources? What is the actual percentage, if you know information about this, that is allocated to Vallejo? And as our supervisor, how can you make sure that Vallejo receives its appropriate share based on population of these resources? Councilman McConnell.
Thank you. Yes, the overall county budget is $1.1 billion, but 80% of that is already allocated to other sources. So we're really talking about a little over $200 billion to split up amongst the 7 cities. And that is where the fight comes in. And that's where you have to have a representative who's looking out for your area to go after that money. A lot of that money is tied up through transportation and through housing. But for those funds that are not, that means you've got to fight for it. And one thing it is, after being a trial lawyer for 40 years, I'm one heck of a fighter for money. So I know how to get money out of juries, I know how to get it out of judges, and I can get it out of my fellow councilmen or supervisor members. But it's not allocated on a proportionate per person allocation. It's not even allocated on a basis of need. It's allocated on a basis of who gets along with other people and how well do you scratch somebody else's back. And that has to change, quite honestly. Because if it doesn't, then Vallejo and every other city is going to be on its own, but Vallejo is going to continue to get the short end of the stick. That's why I want to go to Fairfield, is to fight for that money. Because if we don't get that money down here, then we will continue to not grow. That's just a pure simple fact of reality. And there is so much need in this city that needs to be addressed. That's why we're getting the short end of the stick down here. That's why we wind up getting the detention centers. That's why we get the counties putting people down here to see how the program is going to work first. We can't do that. We have to go ahead of the curve. And the mental illness, the addiction problems, the lack of vocational training, that all ties up together. We're going to have to put a lot of money into resources. And if you want to put money into resources, you're going to have to change the tax code. Because when you change the tax code, that's where the money goes. And if you attract the change in the tax code so that the money will flow, then you're going to see an improvement in the local areas. But change the tax code, and that means lobbying Congressman Thompson and our state legislators, because there is no better social policy and law than the tax code.
Thank you very much. Okay, Patrice.
Thank you. I have a completely different approach. 1.1 billion is the number, and of the services, health and social services gets the largest part of those dollars. So then the question is, we go to health and social services, and the question is, how many people are we servicing? So the number is 28,000 individuals in Solano County is being serviced by health and social services. And there are, of course, multiple instances where those people are seeing more than one time. So that number goes up to 78,000, I believe, number. So 78,000 services are happening in Solano County. So my question is, how does that break down to Vallejo and Benicia and Fairfield? And I don't know, I never got that number back. Not a county supervisor. Once I'm a county supervisor, I have a feeling folks will respond to my questions better. But I do know, to answer your other question, you asked if we are is Vallejo the biggest city? And I believe Vallejo is 120,000 people, and Fairfield is about 118. So I think it's about the same. But I do believe that the Vallejo needs are bigger. There are, when I go to health and human services here in Vallejo, they are a very robust health center, but they still need more resources to help more people. So does Fairfield. I visited them both because that's what I will do as your county supervisor. I'm not just going to sit and talk. I'm going to go down to where we need the services and see where those gaps are, which, by the way, include not only health services, that's your mental services, that's your veteran services. Those are the communities that need us the most. We need to be down there asking the right questions. That's how we get more funds.
Thank you. And Ms. Sherlock.
Thank you. So I think this is a very complex question, and one of the things that I would say about this is that Robert's right. A lot of the money that comes from county is already allocated. A lot of it comes from the federal government. So the Administration on Aging, for example, a lot of funds come in through the state down to the county and then gets distributed. A lot of people that receive those services are based on eligibility requirements. And so they should be receiving, people in Vallejo should be receiving all of the entitlement types of programs based on their eligibility, just like everyone else. And I don't have the data to that, Kelvin, so I can't speak to it specifically. But here's what I will speak to. One is that we leave a lot of money on the table, the county does and the cities do, and we can do a much better job partnering together to draw down grant funds and take advantage of different opportunities that are available to us. There is such a need, both in mental health, behavioral health, aging services. I mean, what about our foster youth? We're not even talking about our foster youth, and foster youth often end up as homeless individuals. They need opportunities as well. And so we can do a better job doing that. There's a lot of money that's left on the table. The county does not go after enough of the grants that are available. They do not add head count. We need to take a look at really how they're doing their whole human resources system. because of the conservative nature of the county, they're not adding the head count to meet the needs of the community. And that's one of the places that I want to see metrics. I want to say, what is the needs of the community? Show me the metrics on the percentage that you're doing, and let's let the data begin to drive some of the decision making, and we'll be able to answer that question for you, Calvin.
Thank you, Ms. Monica Brown.
So 80% is slide through. It comes from the state, it comes from the federal government. We have no say, it already goes. But the remaining 20% goes to the sheriff, goes to your public defender, goes to the district attorney. So there's a lot of that money is already dealt with. So for example, as was just stated, this year I spent a year being the chair of the Area Agency on Aging. We received $3 million, but because we redid it, instead of the nonprofit, any senior who applied and qualifies now receives Meals on Wheels, which over 100 of them did not when the nonprofit was taking care of them. So we need to look at our nonprofits, and I've held meetings telling nonprofits, unless you have measurable objectives and can show the data, chances are we're not going to fund you next year. So a lot of nonprofits might not make it. And so where I'm going with all of this is that we need to look at the people who are taking the money, which is 80%, and are they actually getting it to where it needs to be, or is most of it dealt with in terms of management salaries? So for example, if your nonprofit gets $100, and by the time you pay for everything is only a nickel getting to the people that need the help, that's what we need. And we need to work with our legislative body to change the rules so that we can delve more into the nonprofit, because it's really hard to get that particular data. Like for example, Shelter Inc. got $2.4 million to build a kitchen. I was appalled at that, but it's a JPA, which is a joint powers agreement, and I could not say no. Why do they need a $2.4 million kitchen when we have people that are out in the streets?
Thank you.
Is there an opportunity just kind of a rebuttal?
I will extend that.
So our nonprofits and the nonprofit sector is a critical frontline defense to all of our services. They're embedded in the community. It also includes our faith communities. And one of the things around the contracting is actually the vast majority of nonprofits do not have enough money to adequately pay staff, to adequately recruit staff, to make sure that they have the latest and greatest in terms of technology and systems to serve people. Not only that, but the standards that the county holds them to is exceedingly high. The county often will also not pay them right away, so they have to pay out their salaries, they have to pay out their services, and then they wait months. Where is that money going to come from? So actually, I have very much disagreed with Monica here. Our nonprofits need more capacity building. I have spent the last 15 plus years working on building the nonprofit capacity in this county. I've invested more than $100 grand in pro bono consulting, building the strategy, building the boards, strengthening those nonprofits, doing my best, because that's really where the rubber meets the road.
Thank you.
So if that had been the case, then every senior would have been fed under Meals on Wheels, because the nonprofit did not do their due diligence and there was no oversight even by the state.
Or the county.
The mic will go to the person that I tell is permission to use the mic in a controlled environment. We did allow 1 moment for a rebuttal, and we want to stay within the decorum of an appropriate meeting. Housing affordability is a challenge throughout the Bay Area. This is a two-edged sword. Vallejo housing market prices are perceived as undervalued by speculators and is rapidly increasing the displacement of many longtime residents and young families. In your opinion, how can the county engage and assist in the development of affordable housing community designs and models that will help maintain the diversity we have in our city? One of the comments or notes here is smaller home designs as opposed to massive homes. Who's in line to answer first? I think it's Ms. K. Patrice.
So this is something that I've thought about a lot, just thinking about the shortage of units that we have. And I think we need to be innovative. I think due to the number of units that we need to increase, we need to do some building up versus out. We just need to be really, really creative. How do we add these additional units? And I think I've talked about it before, but also thinking about them in grids. So in the homeless community, we need more shelters. And by the way, I don't know why this is, but I went by Shelter Inc. and I don't see anything happening. That's supposed to be a homeless shelter, and I don't know why it looked empty when I passed by it the other day. I'm looking into it. Running a campaign, but still looking into these things that really are disturbing me. But we need more. But I've gone to Christian Help Center here. They do amazing work. We need more units. We need to be creative. Workforce development units, low income, senior housing. We need LGBTQ housing. That's a very unique housing. We need housing that have wraparound services right there. Let's meet people where they are. We're gonna meet those eligibility requirements. The people here are suffering and they're hurting and they need those services. We just need to be creative. And I know we can because I've worked with an organization. I was a director at an organization and this is what we did. We need to do better, think out of the box. We have to.
Thank you. Ms. Sherlock.
Would you mind repeating the question again?
Great, I moved on. In your opinion, how can the county engage and assist in the development of affordable housing community designs and models that will help maintain the diversity that we have in our city? One suggestion has been smaller home sizes, which reduces the cost of housing.
Well, first of all, I would have to say the reason why we're in this housing crisis in large part and the lack of affordable housing really falls on the cities. The county does not take on housing. They came up with an agreement where this housing is largely belongs to the cities. The cities, when they develop their general plan, they're supposed to identify the number of affordable housing units that they have the capacity to build. Unfortunately, there was a loophole where they didn't actually have to build it by state law. They just had to indicate that they had the capacity to build it. And this isn't just our cities in Solano County, it's throughout the state of California. There's been a long time neglect of building affordability, and so we have a very wicked problem. I think one of the things that the county can actually do is really support, and it's small, and it's just a drop in the bucket, quite honestly, but is to support the establishment of a shared housing program to begin to help some people share resources. So for example, there are a lot of seniors, older adults who may be asset rich but income poor. So they have a nice home that they live in, it's large, maybe they're even lonely and isolated. To begin to actually rent out part of the room, bring in some income. There's been groups, the HIP program in San Mateo actually showed that not only does it help people stretch their means further, it actually builds community because people now are coming in together. Now that's a small problem, but it could happen quickly and it could begin to ease some of the pain in some situations. But the housing crisis is and affordability is a very, very complex and it's a wicked problem.
Thank you. Supervisor Brown.
So the county has 8,000 acres that are available for housing. You would have to look at them and see how far out they are, because a lot of times if you have difficulty affording a home, chances are you might not have transportation. But it is something that we could look at. But my colleague over here said it apropos. The county has decided to stay out of the housing issue. But what can cities do? Well, you have the Planning Commission, you have land use, and this might cause some people not to get elected again, but rent control works very well. And I really think, especially what happened with those apartments that were sold, and all of a sudden the rents tripled, or well, I'd say doubled. That was wrong. Pure and simple, that was wrong. And so luckily the city council had those emergencies, and there's and legislation's changing until January, but that is wrong. And in terms of Shelter Inc., unless you come with a funding source, they will not house you. Pure and simple. I would not have voted for them, but that was the city of Fairfield. I would have picked the Berkeley group. So I'm just sharing with you, that is why when you go buy Shelter Inc. and you don't see anything happening, you have to have a funding source. So I think you could get the funding source if you took someone in and then worked with the county to see what they're eligible for. Again, are they a veteran? Or should they be receiving Social Security? What are certain things that you can do? But Shelter Inc. is not interested in that. Trust me. He and this guy and I have already had issues in front of everybody, so it's on TV.
Thank you.
So, am I a red line? Okay, there we go.
Sorry. Thank you.
Let's talk about housing across the spectrum, because the question was about the county, okay? I disagree that the county should be saying to the cities, this is your baby and we're not having anything to do with it. I think that's wrong, and I think it needs to change. But it needs to change with respect to the green belts that do exist in this county, because that's one of the things that makes this county unique. One of the ways we can change is the county can have pre-adopted architectural drawings and plans for somebody who wants to build an ADA unit. Because if you go in as an individual to create an ADA unit in Vallejo or Fairfield, the first thing planning is going to tell you is where are your plans and where are your architectural drawings, and let me see it, and you need to go see an architect. And that's anywhere from $1,800 to $8,000 for a homeowner. So if we have pre-approved ADA compliant granny unit flats that can be handed to the applicant, that's going to cut down on the cost, and you'll be able to see more granny units built within the cities. And I also think it needs to be in the unincorporated area as well. If you look at homemakers, there are a lot of places where that can be done. Vacaville and Fairfield are different. They're not urban as we are. We're going to have to go up in Vallejo. We don't have any place to go out. Another thing that can be done is we're going to have to make it appealing for people to develop housing. Because if somebody can't see a way to make a buck off it, it's not going to happen, except for somebody who wants to build an ADA unit for their parents, their children, their whatever. That means you're going to have to lobby Washington and Sacramento to change the tax code. Because if you make it profitable for somebody to put money into it, they will put the money into it. And you see that with affordable housing now. You have all these affordable housing corporations that come to Vallejo and Vacaville and say, sanction us, we want to re-extend the bonds, we want to get another 55 years out of them. Well, they do that because they can make money out of it. And we need to look more closely at how they're making that money and where they're putting it and how it impacts the people who live in these communities. We also have to determine housing all across the needs, including veterans and seniors and mobile home parks and everything else. But yes, we are going to probably have to be built up and smaller.
Thank you. We have a few more questions. We are now at 1 hour and 35 minutes in, I believe. No, 1 hour and 5 minutes in. If we need to take a break, we can do so on request. The next one, no, we keep moving.
Yes.
One moment, please. This is regarding employment and job training resources. And we do understand that the county has a position, but again, our questions have to be framed based on where we are. In keeping with the idea that Vallejo was a wonderful community when the Naval Shipyard was here, viable, well-paid jobs and opportunities were the engine. As a supervisor, what can you do to help bring local job opportunities for Vallejo citizens who live, work, and play in the city? We oftentimes hear about the development of jobs and the corporations being brought in that are bringing jobs to the city. However, if the community does not have people that are qualified to do the jobs, are there requirements that those new corporations provide training in order to bring local people up to speed so that they can become a part of that economic engine? So back to the specific of the question, can you, as a supervisor, what can you do to help bring local job opportunities for Vallejo citizens who live, work, and play in the city? And I believe, Ms. Sherlock, you're first.
Okay, so Solano County is part of the Economic Development Corporation that is working broadly around bringing in employers and businesses. The other day, Slater McKenzie, the Economic Development Director of the City of Vallejo, was talking about all the wonderful things that are happening out at Mare Island. I think, first of all, I think we need to have a regional presence where people see us and recognize us. Solano County has largely been neglected in so many ways. We're not taken seriously, we're not seen as professional, we're not seen as at the same level as some of the other Bay Area counties. And I think part of that is professionalizing our overall image to attract companies in and attract businesses in. But we also need to address some of the issues. Some of the issues need to start in the schools. One, we need to have a better education system that's outside of the role of the county, but we need to support better education for our youth so that they can actually be job ready. We need to make sure that we're doing assessments around what are the new companies that are coming in, what kinds of jobs, trainings, and skills do they need, and how do we make sure that partnering with workforce development in the kinds of vocational programs that are at the jail, through the programs that we're through at the county, that we are actually training people for the jobs that are here, as well as the jobs that are intended to come, and making sure that those are livable wage jobs. And I think that's what we have to champion.
Ms. Brown?
So it's been interesting as a classroom teacher that the Board of Supes is even talking about education. And Lizette Henderson, who happens to be the Solano County Office of Ed Superintendent, came and gave her annual report. And one of the things was how wonderful Solano Community College is going. But we can translate that into the K through 12. Fairfield and Vacaville have an early college program. Vallejo needs that too, so that if you want to get your AA degree and your high school diploma at 18, you can, and it's free. All we have to do is sit down and work together, and that can happen. But we also have the iron workers in Benicia, we have the carpenters in Fairfield. There are places to go and get the training that you need. We just need to put A and B together. But realize that to be honest with you guys, we need to look at other folks who are going to be able to do that. And what I mean by that is that it's not basically a county job. We can have our workforce development. We have that. We have mapped out every place in Solano County where a business can come and how much square footage they have in terms of bringing a factory. What's the transportation? But I have to agree with some of the comments we have up here. What's hurting us is that we don't have the K through 12. And I think we just need, one of the things I always talk with my students was that you have to take the test seriously, right? Because that's the test scores people will use. You go on to the next grade level, but the teachers stay. And that's what, unfortunately, the public looks at when you look at their report card.
Mr. McConnell?
Thank you. There's a wide range of activities that a supervisor can and should be doing that aren't being done. One, of course, is integrating it more with the County Department of Education, which means putting pressure upon each local school district to recognize that high school students can and should receive credit for training in the trades. That means that if they are out there working on the job under union supervision, they're going to get credit towards it. I grew up in the mountains where people went into ranching and went into farming and forestry. And the kids in high school there got credit for that through FAA. We can do that down here as well. 4-H clubs do the same thing. Another thing that this county supervisors can do is, since it's basically treated by some as a part-time job, that frees up a lot of time to go out and lobby. You can go down to the corporations that are looking to expand and you can pitch something to them. I've done that as a city council person. And again, the K through 12 is one of the biggest problems, at least for the city of Vallejo. Another thing that can be done is you can reach out to international organizations. I just returned from Ensenada on my own dime on a Sister Cities junket to talk with them about creating a sister city with Vallejo, which is in the process. And one of the things we first talked about was the exchange of jobs, because they have a port there. They have an Army and a Navy base. They have a shipyard. And we have a California Maritime Academy here. So they're looking at, can we have some of our students from Ensenada come to school and attend California Maritime Academy, because we have a maritime industry in Ensenada as well. So there's that opportunity for international development of jobs as well. But more than anything else, we're going to have to start looking at the reality that baby boomers and millenniums are not going to be working until they're 95 years old. And when that group moves on, there's going to be a void. We're not training people to come into that void, and we either pick up the slack now, or it's going to be too late later. So we need to put money and that time and effort into that, and we need to be a little less rigid in how we think about doing these jobs, because otherwise we're going to continue on what we've been doing.
Thank you. Kay Patrice.
Thank you. So workforce development and connecting us and our youth to jobs means everything. We need to stop talking about it and doing it. I mean, these are all great theories. Who's going to connect the dots? Who's going to go to the schools and pull these youth into pathways for opportunities? Who, when Solano, and by the way, Solano Economic Development Corporation does amazing work. They spent a lot of money, they did a mapping. They mapped industries, they looked at industries in Solano County and saw where they're going. So where will these industries be in 10 years, in 20 years? And now how do we connect people to it? We have this great document. We spent, I think it was $20,000 that was spent on it. I think it was more, but I'm under. I don't like to go over. I think I'm under, because it was a few years ago. What are we doing with it? Is that just a manual that's sitting on somebody's desk? Let's do something with this work. And that's another thing. I'm really tired of seeing work done in silos. This amazing work that nobody knows about and nobody knows what to do with. We have to do better. And it's time to stop making excuses and do the work.
Thank you. This question was submitted regarding emergency notification systems. Over the past 2 years, there have been numerous incidents that have required citizens to shelter in place, whether due to forest fires, PG&E blackouts, refinery explosions, etc. The emergency warning or alert system appears inadequate. As a supervisor for the entire county, what can you do to improve or replace the infrastructure of the existing system to ensure that as much community information saturation as possible is available, especially here in the Vallejo area? And the next person is Ms. Monica Brett.
So the two things that I have set up, well, not set up, for me personally, is Nexel and the Solano Alert, and I received those. Now, has the county done the best job? No, but in this last go-around with the fires, Solano County was never called by the city of Vallejo to ask to give help, because I've talked with Don Ryan, and he said, Monica, no one contacted, because there were folks here without energy for 5 or 6 days, and no word got out to the county to come and help. We need to sit down and set up a flow chart. Who's going to do what? Who's going to make what? What I mean by make what? Who's going to make the phone calls? Who's going to do this? Who's going to do that? But you personally right now can go on Solano Alert, you can go on Nexel, and you can get information. It's not the best because, you know, input in, input out, that kind of thing. But we do need to sit down, and I think there was a learning experience this last time around that we have not set up the appropriate ways in order to make sure that people get the services they need. And we need to be working on that. That should never happen again.
Mr. McConnell.
Thank you. One of the difficulties you're articulating is a failure of communication. And one of the things we hear from about law enforcement all the time is we don't have radios that will let us communicate with the fire department, with the county, with the sheriff, with the Forest Service. There needs to be more of a centralized coordination, and that should be done, I believe, at the county level, bringing the staff people in from police, fire, and public works to say, this is the system we need to have throughout the county. We all need to get on it, and we also need to coordinate with our surrounding counties of Contra Costa and Napa County as well. Because if there is an earthquake, it's not going to stop at the county line. It's going to cross that line as it did before. But without that coordination, especially through staff, it's not going to happen. A legislature can at best set the policy, which is all supervisors can really do. After that, you hammer on staff to make it happen. And one of the things that we saw is that when Vallejo did his emergency preparedness plan years ago, It sat on the shelf. Nobody followed up on it. We haven't looked at it for probably 5 or 6 years. Well, that's a staff responsibility. The plan is still there, but it hasn't been followed up on. And part of it is because the city has been spread too thin. There's also no coordination between the city and the county, which does need to take place. The county can create an emergency services officer to coordinate these activities with the city. But otherwise, you're going to have each city running around doing its own independent little thing, and they won't be able to talk with American Canyon about somebody flowing in with contraband on a police basis, or the fire department figuring out, well, do we go rescue this person because he's on this side of the county line or that kind of county line. So that needs a lot of coordination. It can be done between staff and the Board of Supervisors, but the Board of Supervisors has to at least set the tone.
Thank you. Kay Patrice Williams.
Thank you. So we've already talked about Solano Alert, but what I wanted to talk about is a department under Solano County, Emergency Management Services. And I just last week or the week before participated in their multi-city, multi-county, multi-corporation in Solano County emergency preparedness, where they simulated a mass shooting at the fairgrounds, and there were 150 of us, and they went through the systems of having all these city, police, fire, emergency prepared people that came out and came to our aid, and then, by the way, they were also collaborating with the hospitals. So they went through this whole mass shooting where we were tended to our wounds and transported to these hospitals and then treated at hospitals. That happened, and that happens either every year or every other year. But what I will tell you is, it's amazing that happened, but we need to do it more. I sat out at the county fair for 30 minutes waiting for aid. So it was an amazing service, but we need to do it more. We need to go into like an automatic. When something happens, this is what we do. And I shouldn't be the only community member there. Why weren't we invited in to that process? We should be there. We should all know what to do when there's going to be an emergency. There's emergencies. They're happening. It's earthquakes and it's fire, but there's more. We need to be prepared for anything in the county. And yes, that can be dictated from a county level.
Ms. Sherlock.
There's multiple pieces to this. One is we need to have vision for a safe and healthy community that provides for well-being. Part of that is anticipating issues that are going to come forward. So with all the wildfires, I went ahead and said, well, Green Valley is one example. We need to do something, because if Green Valley ended up with a wildfire, it actually would be another paradise. Just one example. One of the things that we did is we were pulling together a fire safe council. We're going to be creating a fire-wise site. We'll be able to draw down resources, and those resources will help CAL FIRE build a fire break around it. But it's also engaging the residents to be part of their own solutions. So the communication is critical. Alert Solano, I held 2 emergency preparedness events, by the way, one in Benicia and one in Vallejo. The purpose of those events was to give residents information that they need in the case of an emergency. And where do they get the information? One of the things is our fire departments are doing a great job. We need to invest more in our fire departments and support fire personnel. The county needs to take a stand on some of the county fire districts because they're not investing in those, and they're becoming very vulnerable. One of the ways that we can support one another is not only Alert Solano, but what we know is that older adults, a lot of older adults don't have mobile phones, which requires a text. They're not tech savvy, so they won't know to go onto the internet and type in their address and know they need to evacuate. So the CERT teams, the community emergency response teams, where neighbors are looking out for neighbors, is one of the ways to do it. Some of the advice from the fire division chiefs were, hey, get on social media as much as you can, but also have a call list. So we have to do 2 things. We have to coordinate those efforts and bring the cities and the county together, and I think we need to do far more of that. It's one of my criticisms of the county, is that we're not partnering enough. and we need to say, how do we make sure that all of our systems are communicating to one another, and how are we making sure that we're having additional ways of communicating to the community, including preparing them and giving them the resource and the tools that they need to be safe. Because when an emergency strikes, an earthquake, or a horrible fire strikes, guess what? You're on your own, in your home, with you and your neighbors. So we want to make sure that we're addressing it from multiple angles. I've already done that. I'm proactive. I'm very much of a person of action.
Thank you. The next category is related to youth and recreation. Let's again return to the Vallejo of old. You know, the one where some people that claim it was so great. The youth in the community of old had a variety of out-of-school activities, including apprenticeship programs and jobs, and organized recreation that were a part of the city parks and recreation program at no charge to the families. This is a question of opinion because we're trying to delve into who you are and what you think as much as how you can make change. What do you believe can be done, and how can the county assist in increasing the available activities that our youth would have an interest in, such as music, studios, ice skating, roller skating, and other endeavors at no direct charge to cash-strapped families? And the first person to have the opportunity to respond will be Mr. Robert McConnell.
One of the events that is widely recognized in California as being very, very successful is the Monterey classic car exhibit. Exactly. And the reason for that is they weren't dependent upon government to do it. They went out and they created the Monterey Community Foundation, a nonprofit. And that has never happened in this city or in this county. We don't have a Vallejo Community Foundation that does this type of activity, or let alone one on the county level. I believe that the county should facilitate the creation of such an organization so that you don't have government bureaucracy involved in setting up demands that have to be met. That, I believe, will accomplish more than anything else. I mean, I grew up in the mountains, and we didn't have these amenities. We had the outdoors that we just went out and used. We had 4-H. We had ranching. But if you depend upon government for everything, I think it's going to get too stymied. And that's the last thing you want with youth, is a stymied activity. So I would be very much in favor of seeing a local community foundation take over. Maybe it needs a little seed money, a little guidance from the county or the city or both entities put together. But by having a community foundation, you will see exproportionate improvements in community involvement. I don't think I would want the director of the county budget telling us how to create a program that has to be cost consciousness in order to comply with pension retirement contributions. It's counterproductive. So let's turn around and say, okay, citizens, we have an opportunity here. Let's work jointly to create this, and then let them fly and create.
Thank you. Ms. Patrice.
We are all responsible for our youth, and we're not doing a good job. I just heard the list of activities, ice skating rink. I have no idea if our youth want an ice skating rink. That is our generation. I don't know if they're interested. We need to ask them what they're interested in and what we can do for them. We need to, how about this? Let's go to our youth and let them know that we care. That doesn't have to be a Solano County board of supervisors thing. How about that be an us thing? How about that be a community thing? How about that be our city council thing, our trustee thing? That's an all of us thing. We are all responsible for making sure that our youth succeed. And we're not talking to them like we should be. When I go to youth events, I'm usually the only one there. I don't see many officials there. We have to do better, because when we reach out for them, they reach out for us. Yeah. I have a team, in my campaign team, it is youth inspired. They have their own, there's a regular team, and then there's the youth team, and they are on a whole nother gear. And it's because I gave them, I just reached out to them and I told them I cared. Today at this event, I only see 2 youth. Did we invite? Why don't we have others? Do we invite them? Do we invite them to board meetings? Do we invite them to trustee meetings? We're not doing a good enough job reaching out for them.
Thank you. Ms. Sherlock.
There's a couple of things. One is, I think first of all, we need to make sure our communities are safe, right? So we need to make sure that families feel comfortable with their children going out and participating in activities, that they can actually trust that the activities that they're participating in are safe or run, and productive in some way, and are run by responsible adults who are going to love and nurture and take care of them. We also need to address the transportation issue. So you have a wonderful recreation center here off on Mare Island, but getting to that from Mare Island, there's no public transportation that goes from the mainland over to that recreation center. We need to address that. Some of these are those kinds of fixes. And quite frankly, I think that we need to engage the community in a way of how do we wrap our arms around this next generation and invest in this next generation. Both in terms of coming together, maybe doing some kind of, it could be a foundation, but bringing together, if it's a skate park or some other way, local donors who are going to commit to building those kinds of things and supporting those kinds of things for kids. But primarily, I think we have to make it safe. People need to be able to safe, and we need to be kid-friendly. And I hate to say it, but I see neighbors who sometimes, I love the kids that are running around in our neighborhood, and then there are some neighbors who are like, oh, get off the street, or we've got to change our culture and our whole response to children and to youth, period, and we need to make sure they have access to those opportunities, and those that can't afford it definitely need access to those opportunities. I think the city plays a role in that through their recreation department. I think the county can play a role in that, maybe drawing down some grant dollars, and I think philanthropy can play a role in that, maybe tapping into some of the local community foundations.
Thank you.